How Finance MEC Ravi Pillay delivered his department's budget vote earlier today. He presented a gloomy picture of the economic outlook, saying the effects of COVID-19 will be detrimental. Let's chat to him. Good evening, Mr. Pillay, and thank you so much for your time on News at Prime. Firstly, how badly affected are you expecting your particular city to be?
Hi, good evening, and good evening to your viewers. Well, KZN is part of South Africa, and we're going to be impacted in the same general way as the country as a whole, but we've disaggregated our figures. And for KZN, we are forecasting a 7.5% contraction in the economy, largely across almost all sectors. We think that tourism will probably have the biggest hit, so to speak, but manufacturing and the textile industries, even agriculture, surprisingly, would have a short-term negative effect. And we are working now quite hard on our program of recovery. We've engaged all the sectors. We've broken up the economy into 12 sectors, and we are engaging with each one, trying to devise a program tailor-made to that particular industry. Of course, we accept that this is part of the worldwide phenomenon. Almost every country in the world has negative growth rates. Some of the biggest economies have negative growth rates of up to 6%. So we understand that it's part of the international nature of it internationally is such. But we're also seeing the opportunity here with the disruption of the global supply chain. How do we try to regain our space and try to manufacture things ourselves? So the whole local production aspect of the economy is getting very, very serious attention. I mean, our clothing and textile industry, for example, at one time was employing about 300,000 people, and now it's down to about 40,000 people.
Sure.
We believe that that can be grown, especially if we try to recapture the space of what we've been importing, things that we could make ourselves.
Sure. Now, one of the difficulties with combating this virus is that there hasn't necessarily been any new money being brought in to budgets. How have you had to reprioritize your spending in the province in order to ensure that you're able to meet the demand, the demands that are required to fight COVID-19, but at the same time, there are other social development projects that still need to continue, because those, of course, service people who need them desperately?
You've captured the challenge quite sharply. Finding the money to deal with COVID-19 issues is not an issue, it's a priority. We've already committed to the kind of spending that we need to do in relation to health and social development in particular. And of course, education now is going to become a very big number to deal with the issues of education as we go out to a full rollout. But for the moment, we're quite comfortable with our allocations towards health and social development. But these monies have to be found somewhere, and that's where the challenges lie. Now, the National Minister would have announced, in fact, the President announced, that of that 500 billion rand package, there's 130 billion that comes out of government departments. 30 billion of that comes from provincial budgets. Our share of that is going to be about 6.2 billion, which we've got to cut in order to fund the COVID-19 expenditure. 100 billion will come out of national departments. But even there, we will be impacted because a lot of the service delivery infrastructure, especially conditional grants, are located there. So we believe that there's a case to be made for that 500 billion to be reconfigured, and that's some engagements that are happening with the National Minister of Finance. The 500 billion is largely relief at this stage, although it's taking money from our existing departments. It's intended to provide relief to those who are facing the harshest burdens of the COVID-19 immediate period. But to have something for really stimulate the economy, we believe we will need to find something additional. But that's work in progress. The National Minister is expected to deliver his adjustment budget on the 24th of June, and we will then follow up with our own adjustment budget in line with what he presents.
It seems to me, based on what the mayor or rather, let me rephrase it this way: how much allowance or allocation has been put in that budget for increases to some of the employees that are employed by the KZN government?
Okay, I think, judging from the words you're using, you're confusing this issue with the Chegweni municipality, but we are dealing with the province as a whole.
Sure.
Because of the division of powers, health and education are the two biggest departments. And our employee cost as a whole, across the province as a whole, is something like 63% of our entire provincial budget goes to salaries. If you take out the conditional grants, that means that money that's for infrastructure, especially like housing or roads and so on, then that percentage jumps up to about 72%. Look, to a certain extent, you'll understand that departments like health and education, which make up 70% of our budget, would have a high employee cost, because between doctors, nurses, and teachers, that's the bulk of the cost of those departments. But I don't know where you're heading to, but that's why it's important, the negotiations that are taking place at a national level on the public service wage bill becomes very, very important in our ability to deal with this crisis.
So I was just wondering, from a provincial perspective, in fact, what triggered it is of course what happened in eThekwini and the conversations around salary increases there. But from a provincial perspective, have you made allocation for there to be some form of wage increases, 13th checks, or even bonuses in your current budget?
Look, we budgeted in February, so that budget had a particular projection. But that matter, as I understand it, has been put on the table for negotiations at the national level with organized labor. So I think it will be very much a part of the adjustment budget equation. Let's see how those processes roll out.
All right. And now KZN has also been hard hit by the theft of certain PEE stocks that have been procured. How is this ultimately going to affect your budget? Because whichever way you look at it, you need those supplies, and even if they're stolen, you don't have a choice but to replace them.
No, absolutely. We're still waiting for the full report, but the initial indications are that it's not something that will disrupt us too seriously. What we'd be concerned about is that this must not be an example that's going to be followed by many others. So the way we react to it and the way we find the perpetrators and set a precedent as to how this kind of matter gets dealt with is going to be very, very important. We are more worried about the way the procurement aspects are being handled. The National Treasury has issued regulations which give more space for supply chain management practitioners to be able to do things with speed, but we are worried that it's opening the door to where people might think they have a blank check, which is not so. We want to tighten up on that seriously. We already have one investigation underway with regard to blankets that were purchased. We don't want to presume the outcome, but we hope on the 15th of June to be able to present a report to the Premier on that particular matter, and again use it as a case study as to how to do or not do things.
All right, let's leave it there for tonight. The KZN